let's learn this one line that's going to close, and this magical line. And if that was true, if that existed, I'm sure that they would have had that discussion with Putin.
G'day, Damian. Today we're talking about closing. How are you today, sir?
I'm very well, and I'm feeling very closed already because, as we were talking about in the pre-show before we started recording, you're talking about how we should always close to start with. I mean, how do we do that? How do you close at the start?
Yeah, there's a very famous line from Alec Baldwin about ABC, A always B, B, C closing, and the interpretation or the impression is that you close at the end of the sale. How we look at it in the NextGen Sales Masterclass is that you're always closing because you think about you're closing on getting the meeting, you're closing on the client answering questions, you're closing on them agreeing with you to build relationship and to share their issues with you. So when you think about closing, it's happening from the beginning to the end, don't you think?
100%. I mean, when I've been speaking with my clients and working with on behalf of my clients, whenever I speak with someone that's a potential client, and we can get into prospecting and identifying the really key clients in another discussion, but certainly from the very beginning, I'm understanding what it is their needs are. And the aim is not so much to come up with this. I love, it's so fascinating with it. This whole, let's learn this one line that's going to close, and this magical line. And if that was true, if that existed, I'm sure that they would have had that discussion with Putin, and he wouldn't have started that war in Ukraine. But the reality is that doesn't exist. And there's a whole thing about prospecting where you're finding the right clients that are going to work on that. But that's where you're right. You start from the beginning where you're talking about and understanding their needs, so the client closes himself.
They do. And what we keep in mind in the masterclass is that when it's appropriately positioned, the client is looking for what you can offer as much as you're looking for that sales relationship with them. So to some extent, you're closing each other.
And I think,
because
yeah, exactly. Because you're right. You're understanding, firstly, do you have a need? Because this whole sell ice to Eskimos thing, again, one of those, it's like there's so many urban legends out there. People take that to be real, but it's not. It's just like, stop believing that. I love Confucius. It says life is really simple. We insist on making it complicated. And the key part of closing, I've found, is from the very beginning, you're understanding what they need, and can you fulfill that need? And if you get to that point of building that trust, it's all about trust. If they trust that you can deliver, that you can solve their problem. And a lot of times people are closing, the hard sell, closing to a problem that doesn't even exist. But if you understand their problem, they believe you understand their problem, they trust you understand their problem. When they get to that point and they can see that you can solve their problem, the closes happen, and all you have to say is, how do we proceed?
Exactly. And if you think about that sales relationship, one of the things that we look at closely in the Sales Masterclass is the fact that if someone is going to say no, or there's someone who's not an appropriate prospect for the service or product that you're offering, you and the client need to identify that very early in the process. So if you're qualifying and closing early, it's going to mean that your time is freed up to spend more time and more effort and more of your intellectual horsepower on the opportunities that can be progressed. So it's a useful tool. And if they do say no, or if they are going to say no, you want that as early as possible in the process, even at the beginning stage. Yeah.
Exactly. And I use that at the start. One of the things I'll say is, look, I'm here to help you solve a problem. What I understand is your problem, and I want to get more detail on that to make sure that I do understand it, so that I can solve that problem. And if what I've got to offer doesn't solve your problem, I want you to tell me. And that's right up front. So I'm setting the framework, and this is where it's really important from closing, from my experience, is you set that framework from the beginning. Here, I'm here to help you. And if it's not going to help, then please let me know. I'd rather you let me know earlier. Certainly don't say maybe. I don't want to hear maybe. It's either I can help you or I can't help you. And if you're not sure, then I'd like to know, and I'll ask you more questions or share more information with me so I can know what that problem is, so I can solve that. And I set that framework right at the very beginning, and that's the close. I'm setting it up from the beginning. I'm here to help you. If you believe you can, I can help you, then say yes, and we'll work together. And my aim is also too, one of the things I'm closing on is not so much closing on that deal, because that's short-sighted. Closing on that deal, and this is where a lot of those precious sales are, I'm going to get the deal. And then they don't think about the after-sales customer service. They don't think about referrals. I mean, it takes, 25 to 28 touch points now to get contact, to get a meaningful conversation happen. It used to be 7 or 8 when I first started. Now, 25, that's a lot. When you put that into a dollar perspective of time that you're spending, it's a massive amount of value that it's costing you. So you want to set that framework from the beginning. And I'm always closing, not on that sale, but on all the future sales, not with just that person, but with all the people they're going to recommend me to.
Exactly. And the interesting thing here too, Damien, is we hear a lot now about having a sales funnel, having like 100 prospects coming in the top and then 2 or 3 dropping out
It's
the
such a
bottom.
catchphrase, isn't it?
It is. And one of
They're
the
all
things
coming to you. You're funneling them down.
they're funneling them down, and you think, okay, well, the last book I read on funnels talked about having like working on about a 10-to-1 ratio. So you've got about 100 prospects or leads coming in the top, and you're closing 10 or less of them. You think, okay, that's 90 people that I'm talking to that aren't going to be customers. I prefer to
It's a
look at it
waste
as
of
more.
time.
I prefer to look at it as a pipe rather than a funnel, and do that
Mm.
qualifying through that qualifying and closing process nice and early,
Yeah.
so that you are spending more high quality time with high quality prospects. The other big benefit, I think, the senior sort of salespeople that will be attending the program would be aware of, is that the busier you are, the more you tend to sell. And the reason for that is
It's
you
so
haven't got the
true.
time to waste talking to people who are never going to buy from you and being a bit delusional about having this huge
Mm.
pipeline that's never going to close. And you're only spending time with high quality clients, and your close rate tends to increase because you're doing that qualification closing process very early in the sales conversation, or you may not even meet with them if they're not someone who is a genuinely prospect, because you don't want to waste their time either. If you're talking to high net worth and high engaged clients, they're unlikely to waste their time meeting with you or talking to you unless they believe that you can genuinely help them. So
Yeah.
the closing happens. The closing happens early, and what you were mentioning there a moment ago is almost like that reverse close. It's like not in these exact words, but you're almost saying to them, "Look, you need to convince me that this opportunity is worth me spending my time on." It's almost like a reverse
That's
flash.
my attitude. It's like my time is valuable. And I love that you mentioned the time component, because people really, salespeople so much I don't spend enough time on that time management. I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and it's time management. It's also just priority management. Well, you've only got so many hours that you're willing to work in a week, whether that's 40 hours or 100 hours, and you think, I'm going to be spending most of that time face to face or virtually with clients who are genuine prospects that can genuinely help and progress. Otherwise, you're literally wasting your time and their time, which is not good use of that valuable time.
Exactly. So for the best use of your time on the closing perspective is you close from the start. You say, this is what I'm here for, and talk about price as well, straight up front. Don't waste, trying to
Yeah,
surprise
yeah.
people.
Yeah, had that. A lot of more junior salespeople are a little bit scared of mentioning price, but price or budget is a qualification criteria, and it's one of the earliest things that you want to get on the table, so that you're qualifying them in and out of being a prospect. Or if because you've got to remember too that most of the clients that you're working with don't know your product or service or consulting offering as well as you do. They may only buy it once every couple of years. If you're selling, say, for example, document management systems to a big company, they may make that decision once every 3 years, whereas you're involved in that every day. So you're educating them too in that closing process that say, hey, given the requirements that you've suggested, the budget's going to be around $500,000. The budget's going to be around $250,000. Is that the sort of financial space you're looking at? And you sort of close them on budget early, so that if they're not thinking that way, if there's no possibility of that progressing, nice and early, and they do too, or they can go back to their business and ask for a bigger investment, because the business may not understand the investment required to make the sort of change they're looking for with a relationship with you.
Yeah, exactly. So to sum this up, your final tip, what is your big tip in relation to closing? On the hot seat here.
On the hot seat, my big tip is to think of the reverse order in the old school traditional sales process. Start by closing at the very beginning, and that's something that you'll get to practice in the NextGen Sales Masterclass.
Exactly. And what you've said there, you will be on the hot seat coming to the Sales Masterclass. Don't come thinking this is going to be easy, but you'll walk out with real practical knowledge that's integrated at an unconscious level, because that's where the change happens. That's what makes a difference in your life. Thanks for chatting, Pete. It's been awesome as always.
Thanks, Damian.